Assalamualaikum. Our group will be present about genetic engineering and cloning. So, our content will be genetic engineering will be explained by Bibi, cloning will be explained by me, and the last one, modality of genetic engineering and cloning will be present by Ainul. So, the first one will be present by Bibi. So, let's go.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Bibi Shaqirah binti Shahazuddin and I will be explaining about genetic engineering.
Genetic engineering is also known as genetic modification. So, genetic engineering ni apa sebenarnya? Okay, genetic engineering is the science of adding new DNA into an existing organism. Okay, so this allows an organism to be given new characteristics or new traits that can protect or improve it in some way. Genetic engineering ni juga merupakan salah satu sains yang quite complicated, so it requires a deep level of understanding on DNA. Okay, now let me share with all of you about the history of genetic engineering. So the term genetic engineering was first used in the year of 1951 by a science fiction novelist named Jack Williamson. So he was not even a scientist, but he already knew about this term and even included it in one of his novels titled The Dragon's Island. So next we have Watson and Crick. So these two people discovered the molecular structure of the DNA, and in the year of 1972, Herbert Boyer and Stanley Cohen performed gene transfer experiments. And finally, in the year of 1974, Rudolf Jenisch had created genetically modified mice, ticos, and it is one of the most historical moments in the genetic engineering punya field. So now let's see the products of the genetic engineering. So the first one we have here is the onions. So even there is a small modifications made in the gene of the onions, tapi ia telah membawa kepada significant effects. Alright, so the first one is it doesn't make people cry anymore when they cut it. So selalunya kalau kita potong bawang, automatic air mata akan keluar kan. Tapi dengan bawang yang telah dimodify genetically, air mata takkan keluar. Okay, so the second one is the concentration of healthy compound like sulfur also has been increased. Next is soybean oil. Okay, kalau soybean oil yang selalunya, dia punya concentration of saturated fatty acids ni sangatlah tinggi. Tapi bila it goes through genetic engineering ni, dia punya concentration level tu akan berkurangan, which is good for our health lah. And it also increases the level of omega-3 fatty acids in the oil tu. Okay, so the third one is quite interesting because dia dipanggil as purple tomatoes. Okay, selalu kan kita tengok tomato semua warna merah kan, tapi dengan wujudnya genetic engineering ni, tomatoes yang warna merah pun boleh jadi warna purple. Okay, purple tomatoes ni terhasil apabila a gene from a decorative plant ditransfer ke dalam buah tomato ni. So bukan saja color bertukar daripada merah ke purple, tapi juga ia produce anthocyanin. So anthocyanin ni is good lah for our body sebab dia reduce the cancerous cells in our body. Besides buah-buahan dan sayur-sayuran, binatang juga boleh di modified genetically. Okay, so the first one we have here is glowfish. Okay, glowfish ni beri nama as a glowfish sebab ikan-ikan ni glows in the dark. Okay, so these glowfish were created by Dr. Ziwan Gong from National University of Singapore. And in 1999, Dr. Gong and his team extracted the green fluorescent protein called as GFP from a jellyfish and then dimasukkan dalam zebrafish. So hasillah glowfish ni. So glowfish ni were actually inspired by real life and marine life that glows in the sea for biological purposes such as catching prey. The last product of genetic engineering is the featherless chicken. Okay, so as we can see here, there is no feathers at all. Sebab ini telah dihasilkan untuk make the lives of farmers easier. So they don't have to spend so much time on macam cari bulu-bulu ayam tu one by one. Genetic engineering also has its own advantages. So the first one is treating and defeating diseases. So genetic engineering could wipe out some of the world's most dangerous and challenging diseases that have defied destruction in such a way. There are many genetic mutations that human beings can suffer from that will probably never be ended, kan? So we need to actively intervene so that we are safe or we are protected from those diseases. Okay, so the second advantage is life expectancy increases. So since we can fight many diseases with genetic engineering, therefore the overall life span or expectancy of people will likely to increase since the dangers of death due to those diseases reduced. Next, organisms also can be custom made. So genetic engineering can make changes in the organisms in order to show desirable traits or characteristics. So for instance, a tree can be altered genetically so that it can absorb more carbon dioxide, dan secara tak langsung ia juga boleh mengurangkan global warming. Last advantage is it fastens the growth of animals and plants. So the growth rate may be altered genetically so that it can get mature efficiently. So for example, the plants can be genetically modified so that it can survive in bad conditions, contohnya haba yang tinggi. Meanwhile, for animals, they also can be genetically modified to improve production. So for instance, dairy cows boleh dimodified so that they can produce more milk. Lastly, let's see the disadvantages of genetic engineering. So the first one is health issues. Genetic engineering also poses a risk to human health. So for example, genetically modified food may lead to long-term health issues. There is not enough reliable data untuk tengok how harmful genetic engineering ni in a long term. The second disadvantage of genetic engineering is its effects on wildlife. Okay, genetically modified plants often contain its own pesticides, so it can be quite harmful for the animals yang makan these types of plants. So binatang-binatang ni boleh jatuh sakit and boleh mati juga akibat makan plants yang dah modified genetically. Okay, so the last disadvantage is it does not guarantee higher nutritional values. Okay, even though we can genetically engineer animals and also plants to get higher nutritional levels, but we cannot expect the outcome untuk come out the same as what we planned. Also, rapid growth can also reduce protein levels and overall nutrition levels. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. Now I will be present about what is cloning. Cloning is a technique that they use to make exact genetic copies of living thing. Tak kisahlah sama ada nak clone untuk all parts of the animals ataupun untuk tissue saja ataupun cells. Tapi sebenarnya bukan untuk animal saja, tapi boleh juga tumbuh-tumbuhan dan juga boleh clone manusia. Kemudian sebenarnya clones bukan saja buatan manusia, tapi dia dah ada secara natural. Sebagai contohnya, single cell organisms like bacteria make exact copies of themselves each time they produce. Okay, next. And disadvantages of cloning. Firstly, we look at advantages. Infertility. Infertility bermaksud cloning dapat bantu sesama pasangan sejenis atau pasangan yang tidak subur untuk mendapatkan anak yang diperbuat daripada sel-sel yang diklon. Next, organ replacement. Organ replacement can be source of transplant organs or cells. Usually, scientists use stem cells to do that process. Next, genetic research is cell cloning that can assist scientists in gene research and editing. Next one, selective human traits. Cloning dapat membantu untuk membuang gen yang tidak sihat atau membina specific traits. Then the last one, human development. Cloning dapat membina atau membantu perkembangan manusia menjadi yang lebih baik. Now we go to disadvantages. Firstly, reproductive cloning is the negative of human cloning, including the making of designer babies. Next, the human cloning could be a violation at the clone's individual human rights. Then, embryonic cloning. Ini akan berlaku sel-sel kerosakan jika terlalu banyak sel-sel yang diklon. Next, unique identities. Okay. Jika dicakap tentang unique identities, ia akan berlaku masalah seperti human rights dan moral sebab diorang nak protect their unique identities. Then, societal impacts. It can produce psychosocial distress between clone and humans. Okay, next. Next, I want to show you guys how cloning works in plant, animals, and humans. I will not explain in detail because you can read here. You can see here of tissue, then go into a box, then cell divide to form calculus, and then tada become carrots. Next, animal. Animal have to process. It can be embryo splitting. Embryo splitting is actually natural cloning. You see here? Actually, kembar is actually one of cloning process. Next, this one is man-made process, nuclear transfer. So, perlukan saintis lah untuk buatkan macam ni. Kalau natural, dia memang tak perlu saintis lah. Memang natural. So, next, this one human. Okay, saya cakap ya pasal advantage tu, dia akan mampu membina specific trait atau buang gen yang tidak baik. So, macam mana proses dia? Inilah proses dia. You can read here, okay? Okay, next, the purpose of cloning, which are extinction, untreatable disease, and testing of medicine. Yes, cloning can help to protect them from extinctions. Tapi, walaupun macam tu, dia tetap juga mempunyai banyak masalah dan banyak juga produk daripada cloning ini berlaku kerosakan. Sebagai contoh Dolly. Dolly sebenarnya adalah salah satu produk yang berjaya disebabkan oleh cloning dan ia adalah seekor biri-biri dan dia sangat membaca pasal cloning akan berkait rapat dengan Dolly. Okay, Dolly adalah seekor biri-biri tapi dia hanya bertahan selama 6 tahun kerana disebabkan penyakit tumor pada paru-paru. Jadi, cloning pun mempunyai banyak masalah sebenarnya. Then, untreatable disease is to treat serious disease such as heart problems, diabetes and spinal injuries. Yang ni disebabkan yang saya ceritakan tadi sebelum ni, dia membantu untuk mengurangkan atau membuangkan gen yang tidak sesuai ataupun gen yang tak baik. Then remove stem cell from a 5-day-old clone embryo and grow specific cell line from them which may treat disease. Next, testing new medicines. Okay, testing new medicines daripada kita membuat ubat-ubatan ataupun test ubat dekat someone ataupun haiwan. So, untuk mengelakkan benda macam tu, dia orang akan menggunakan clone sebelum mengaplikasikan ubat itu kepada manusia atau haiwan yang sebenar. Next, okay, the last one from me, is it safe? Actually, cloning adalah berisiko sebab dia mungkin boleh berjaya dan dia mungkin tidak. Dan berjaya dia adalah low percentage to success. So 95 to 97% of animal cloning attempts stay and invalid. And the scientists who clone dolly fail 276 times before they succeed in producing a single live-born clone of an exact shape. Jadi di sini dapat dilihat melalui case dolly, walaupun ada yang berjaya, tapi yang berjaya pun hanya bertahan selama 6 tahun, sekejap sangat. Okay, then the viable clone suffers increased risk of serious genetic malformation, cancer or shortened lifespan. Okay, memang berjaya tapi umur pendek dan akan mendapat penyakit yang sangat serius lepas itu. Kemudian, clones will not be the same as the originals. Human clones will start from the baby, so he will face various experience while growing up and that will make it different from the original. Okay, kebanyakan kita berfikir clone akan betul-betul like exact clone. Tapi tidak. Jika kita clone, dia akan bermula daripada baby. Jika bermula daripada baby, dan bila dia untuk proses untuk membesar, dia akan melalui pelbagai experience, especially humans. Experience dia akan lain daripada yang lain. So, kemungkinan apa yang kita harapkan akan dapat yang lain. So, akan ada banyak cabaran ataupun kerosakan yang akan berlaku disebabkan proses tersebut. So, that's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Ainul Mardhiah binti Mohd Faisol, and today I am going to present about more reasoning on genetic engineering and cloning, and then I will also give our final thoughts on these two topics. So firstly, as for genetic engineering, there are people who think that it is morally acceptable because firstly, it can help in medical field. So genetically modified bacteria can be used to produce proteins such as insulin and human growth hormone, which then can be used towards orang yang ada penyakit diabetic and dwarfism. It also can increase yield, which genetically modified crops can be resistant towards pests, as for example, Bangladesh eggplant case. So, untuk example Bangladesh eggplant case ni, dekat Bangladesh, eggplant ni is a very important crop. Tapi, bila farmer tanam, it often get destroyed by serangga. And the farmer has to rely on pesticide heavily. Pesticide ni mahal and it also can harm the farmer's health. So, in 2003, they have mengeluarkan eggplant yang telah di modified dia punya genetik to be dorang tambah the BT protein so to make it resistant towards pest. So bila dorang dah tanam this kind of eggplant, farmer boleh kurangkan penggunaan pesticide up to 80%. And their health also improve and their income also menaik. Next is food shortage. So plants who has been designed to be weather resistant can help them survive in climate change. Contohnya dekat North Dakota, dia punya condition soil dia basah. So logically they cannot plant jagung dekat sana, but the jagung yang orang dah scientist dah genetically engineer dia, they can tanam dekat sana. The seed can survive the soil condition. And then lastly is make better plant and animal species. So the traits of plant and animal can be altered according to what we want them to have. So for example is papaya industry in Hawaii case. So in 1990, papaya industry ni macam terancam sebab every time dia ditanam dekat Hawaii, dia akan diserang dengan penyakit ring virus. So genetic engineering ni, diorang buat
supaya papaya tu survive the virus. So without this genetic engineering, the papaya industry will be collide. But however, there are also things that genetic engineering is not morally acceptable because firstly, it is a persecution towards animal. It is because haiwan-haiwan yang akan dilakukan genetic engineering towards them ni, people will put them into a small place and then their makanan pun is far from nutritious. So jadi diorang fikir like this action is not morally acceptable because it is a penganiayaan towards the animal. Next is negative side effects towards animal because bila kita buat genetic engineering ni towards the gene dekat dalam animals tu, dia akan bawakan unintended side effect towards them such as the increased susceptibility to stress, lameness and genetic abnormality. All these side effects not only going to affect the animal, but if they are the child, it will also affect the child. Next is because it can cause bioterrorism. So genetic editing can construct a pathogen to be more lethal, harder to detect and easier to spread. Sebab from daripada 100 tahun yang lalu, ramai dah orang yang meninggal disebabkan infectious disease. Contohnya macam Ebola and also contoh yang terdekat macam COVID-19. It has killed a lot of people, right? So genetic engineering ni kalau disalahguna pakai, it can make terrorists easily engineer a certain bacteria to be resistant to several kind of antibiotic. And cara penyebaran dia also can be making it easier for the pathogen to spread. So people also think that genetic engineering is not morally acceptable because it can affect on human health because all the chemical that have inside of the plants and animal might bring harm toward ourselves. Sebab ada orang kata everything that is not organic is not good, and ada juga orang yang kaitkan this whole thing with the rising number of orang kena cancer. They said like all this genetic engineering are the one that cause this thing to happen macam tu. So next is moral reasoning on cloning. So there are people who think that cloning is acceptable based on website GALLUP. In 2006, 34 people are okay with animal cloning and 13% people are okay with human cloning. So their reason is why, because firstly it can give potential medical benefits, which when they develop the embryo for 7 days and destroy it for their stem cell, and when scientists try to cloning human organs inside of pigs, which is this can contribute towards kita punya kebaikan lah, macam we can take the embryo punya stem cell, and then if the cloning by the way, the scientists that clone human organ inside of the pig is failed, and if it success, it will give benefit for us because we can take lah the organ and supaya kita macam tak rasa susah nak cari donor untuk people yang need for organ. We can simply ambil je daripada haiwan macam tu. And the next is increased population of extinct animals macam mammoth, Royal Bengal tiger, and they think like macam dengan cloning ni haiwan yang dah extinct, we can duplicate them and make them, diorang punya population ni grow again in our society. And then lastly is give benefit in farming, which clone is a good because it can help, like contohnya macam bila kita jumpa a good breed of animal that produce a good meat and milk, or cloning plants who produce sweet fruits. Bila kita clone that kind of breed, it can give benefit for us lah, macam kita akan dapat daging lebih, kita akan dapat haiwan yang dapat keluarkan susu yang banyak, and kita boleh tanam pokok yang keluarkan buah yang banyak, because we take the genetic of that thing, like kita copy 100% and then kita buat semula, so dapat bagi benefit to us lah. Because of that, it is morally acceptable towards some people. However, there are also things that cloning is not morally acceptable because firstly is low fertility rate. Okay, so low fertility rate ni sebab in Dolly case, sebelum scientists tu dapat clone that Dolly sheep, there are 277 embryo yang dimatikan, yang lupuskan sebab it is not successful. So bila kita nak clone human, imagine how much embryo that we will kill to produce satu human clone yang berjaya macam tu. So it is also not morally acceptable sebab dia inhuman, sebab kita only create the new embryonic human dekat dalam lab just to destroy them sebab kita nak ambil diorang punya stem cell je. It is very inhuman things to do. And then lastly is persecution towards animal, sebab it will cause pain sebenarnya towards the animal bila kita nak keluarkan the egg cell from them, and then bila kita nak implant balik the cells, and maybe during the Caesar process masa giving birth, this will all cause pain towards the animal. So because of all this reason, ada setengah orang yang mengatakan cloning ni adalah tidak perbuatan yang tidak bermoral. So now I am going to give you our final thoughts on genetic engineering and cloning. Firstly, we think that genetic engineering is morally acceptable because actually genetic engineering can help save life and many world problems and relieve the pain of those suffering debilitating illness. Tapi as long as it is regulated and assure that all animals yang terlibat are being treated right and address specific ethical concern lah. Kalau dia buat penganiayaan terhadap binatang tu, of course lah not morally acceptable, but we think that it is morally acceptable if it is regulated and assure that all animals are being treated right. Macam tu. So as for cloning, we think that it is not morally acceptable sebab it can cause more harm than good actually. So and this action is very inhuman and immoral if we think about it. And then moreover, the clone version are usually weaker and has a lot of problem compared to the original one. So we think that the action of cloning is not morally acceptable.